Hi, my name's Derek. I'm one of the brewers here at NOLA Brewing Company. Welcome to the brewery, and I'm going to show you how we make beer here. So anyway, we decide what malts we're going to need to make our beer, and then we go ahead and we load them up into this malt room here. So you see our brown ale, we use 6 different malts. Even though it is our lightest beer, it has a lot of different variety of malt in it to get it the full flavor. So on the very end, here's our base malt. This is, again, 80% of every beer you make is going to be this base malt. That's where you get your majority of your starch and your enzymes. And then the rest of these malts are like your seasoning. Once we get all the malts loaded in here, we will load them up a bag at a time manually into this tray here, and it'll run through our mill. Once the grain goes to the mill, it gets cracked, it goes up through this auger here, basically just a corkscrew that dumps it into the holding tank. It pumps up into this holding tank. We can fit all the grain we need for a batch of beer into that tank, so once we're done grinding in, then we'll have all our grain ready to go to mashing in. So we will mix the grain with hot water, and at that time, the enzymes that were created in the malting process now really go to work, and they start breaking down all the starch in the sugar, or all the starch in the grain into sugar. Once you've converted all the starch into sugar, we pump it over into this second container here. This is our ladder ton. It's basically a giant colander. We're looking to separate the solids, the grains, from the liquids, the sugar water, the wort. So we want to make sure we get all the sugar possible out of the grains. So there's a shower head in there, and we go ahead and rinse the grains off to make sure we get every last little bit of sugar out of them. Once we've pumped all the sugar water over into the boil kettle here, this is the third vessel in the process. This is where we start boiling. This is where the term brewing came from. With your boil, that's also when you add your hops. So once we're done boiling the beer for 90 minutes, it's now ready to go into the whirlpool, our final container here. Whirlpool does exactly what it sounds like. It pumps the beer in at a tangent. It creates a big whirlpool in the center that gets all the solids to kind of settle in a cone in the center. So all the hops, all the proteins, maybe a couple grain chunks that got through the filtering process, that all settles in the center, and we're able to pull clear wort off the side, so we have clear wort going into our fermenters. All right, so these are our fermenters here. You can see we've been doing quite a bit of growing. So once the beer is cooled down, we pump it into these fermenters, and that's when we add our yeast. The yeast take the sugar that we created in the mashing process, and they eat that sugar and they produce alcohol and carbon dioxide. This process takes about a week to 3 weeks depending on the type of beer you're making. And the fermenters, you'll notice, have a cone-shaped bottom. The yeast will settle down, it'll come down into the cone, and we're able to pull out the weaker performing yeast early. So we'll cold filter it, and then it'll go into our bright beer tanks. The beer only really spends a day or two in the bright tanks, depending on if we're canning or kegging. We can keg much faster than we can can, so we can empty a tank into kegs in a few hours, whereas canning will take 2 days to empty a tank. All right, after the beer has been filtered and carbonated, it's ready to package. So what we have is we load our pallet of cans into the machine. They get pushed up, and each rack will get pushed off onto the conveyor belt. And then they'll come down this chute here. They'll get rinsed once with water to rinse out any debris, then they'll get sprayed quickly with sanitizer, they'll get turned upside down to drain, and then they'll get turned right side up to get filled. Here we'll fill them 4 at a time with carbon dioxide. CO2 is heavier than oxygen. We want to keep oxygen out of the beer at this point, so the cans will stay full with carbon dioxide for the filling process. They'll get filled 4 at a time with beer, then they'll come down the line here, they'll get the top put on the can, and then 1 at a time they'll go through the seamer here, they'll get seamed, they'll go down to the end of the line where we have a team member putting the 6-pack tops on the cans, taking the 6-packs, putting the 6-packs in cases, taking the cases, putting them in pallets, taking the pallets, wrapping them up, and putting them in the walk-in. And now here comes the best part, where we get to enjoy the beer that we made. Thanks for coming and checking us out. And if you want to come try some of our beers, we have our tap room open 6 days a week. And we have lots of different specialty beers that you can only buy here with different yeast or barrel-aged products and different fruit. So it's a real nice experience. You can come check out the brewery, see how we make it, and then get some really unique beers.